Maude Adams, the most famous actress of the early 20th century, worked with engineers at General Electric to invent and patent the largest incandescent bulb to date. This and her other innovations in lighting and stagecraft revolutionized the performing arts and delighted audiences across the country. Maude Adams was the greatest production artist this country ever saw, according to Bassett Jones, a pioneer of early 20th century lighting design. Adams was descended from second President John Adams, and also the most famous actress of the 1900s and 1910s, working behind the scenes on the era's most sumptuous stage productions, earning $20,000 a week at the time. With no formal training in electrical engineering but a wealth of experience in stagecraft and performance, she helped transform American theater, both as an actress and a designer. Adams was born in November 1872 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Almost immediately, she began touring the western states with her mother, Annie, an actress, and by 9 months old, she was making her stage debut. On the road, Annie taught Maude to read, write, act, and memorize lines, and supplemented this elementary education with a few years of schooling back in Utah. Maude's father was unimpressed, and you can learn more about their relationship in my video on Maude Adams and her manager, Charles Frohman. Adams made her New York debut in 1888. One New York producer, Charles Frohman, emerged as the industry leader in the 1890s, shortly after taking on Adams as one of his regular players in John Drew Jr.'s company. In the early 1900s, he helped Adams ascend stardom. Under the guidance of Drew, of the Drew Barrymore acting family, Adams gained a close friend in his daughter Ethel Barrymore. Ethel became a lifelong friend, saying in an interview about Adams decades later that Adams was the ultimate "I want to be alone" woman. Scottish playwright JM Barrie was enraptured with Adams when he saw her in her role under Drew in Rosemary in 1896. His interest in cross-dressing and younger actors and actresses lit him on fire. He started a lifelong correspondence with the actress, whom he termed Maudie. In a new 1896 comedy penned by Barrie titled The Little Minister, test runs in several U.S. cities generated the requisite buzz for Adams' appearance as Lady Babby, the play's heroine in New York City. The Little Minister would later be recreated with Katharine Hepburn as Lady Babby. Adams was responsible for the lighting, having realigned the theater's arc lamps to achieve a soft, dreamy mood for the scenes set in the woods. Barrie was no inventor, preferring fishing in Scotland to exciting technological advances, and so likely handed the reins over to Adams and Frohman for play production. He was very influenced by his wards, the Llewellyn Davies boys, and would ask them their opinion to get a real child's view on his work, and they may have preferred a more natural scene. You can learn more about the Llewellyn Davies and their strange lives in their video on my channel. At Adams' first entrance on opening night in 1897, audience members leapt to their feet. The applause and cheering lasted for 2 minutes, most likely due to Adams' wonderful portrayal of a tipsy woman, which wasn't seen much on stages then. The ensuing performance exceeded expectations. Standing ovations recalled Adams to the front and center of the stage. She was the new toast of New York. She took bow after bow, a total of 10 times after the second act and 12 times after the final curtain. She is now firmly entrenched in her new stellar position, an influential critic observed a few weeks into the show's run, and is likely to become a popular idol. She proved herself to not only be popular, but a production designer and manager. For her next play, William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Frohman granted Adams authority over most of the technical elements. He continued to trust her with the production values for the next several projects. It may have been that Frohman was too busy with his other productions, or that he saw something of himself in Adams, or that the insistence on control and micromanagement is a relatively modern phenomenon. But for whatever reason, Adams' control over her own productions continued. In L'Anglin from 1900, a play based on the pet name Little Eagle for Napoleon Bonaparte, the cross-dressing Adams oversaw the scenic, costume, and lighting design, all while crafting an authentic performance as the Duke of Reichstadt. She even traveled to Vienna to research the setting and capture the atmosphere. It may be here is where she started to make the acquaintance of the Sisters of the Cenacle, a French order of nuns who welcomed visitors in various convents around Europe. Severely on the decline today, Adams would donate New York land to the sisters later in life. She also stayed in the Cenacle of the St. Regis in Manhattan in World War I. Back in 1905, Frohman and Adams planned the U.S. production of Barrie's Peter Pan, with Adams cast as the title character. Peter Pan had already been seen by London audiences, and children loved it. Adams' performance, as well as her work with costume, lighting, and scenic designers on the realization of the Darlings' London home and the dream world of Neverland, resulted in a smash hit that played more than 1,000 times. Hollywood legend Mary Pickford would eventually write to Barrie, pleading to play Pan in the film version. Adams gained even greater artistic independence off the Broadway stage at Harvard, Yale, and the University of California. There, she mounted productions of epic proportions to the delight of students, faculty, and local theatergoers. In 1908, for a performance of Twelfth Night in which she played Viola, Adams transformed Harvard's largest auditorium into a Shakespearean theater, complete with a painted canvas sky, ornamental pillars, and gallery seating. Modern touches included a concealed orchestra and mood lighting, which dazzled students and professors who agreed to get into the excitement and attend the performance in period costume. Frohman fronted the $10,000 cost, and the proceeds went to the English department, a scaled-down version later played at Yale. On the heels of this success, Adams crafted and executed the largest theatrical spectacle to date at Harvard's football stadium in 1909. There, with the help of more than 1,000 cast and crew members, she recreated the life and death of Joan of Arc according to the classic work The Maid of Orleans by Friedrich Schiller. Proceeds for this production would go to Harvard's German department, due to Schiller's Germanic heritage. With scaffolding and mock landscaping, Adams had half the stadium remade into a battlefield of the 100 Years' War, with herself mounted on a white horse. A team of stage managers, scenic builders, and costume designers executed her vision, and as the date of the performance approached, Adams took regularly Sunday trips by train from New York to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she ensured these technical and artistic efforts would translate to success. One has to remember, this artistic, innovative generation was the one sent to die in the trenches in World War I, and we have never quite seen the same ability since. The Maid of Orleans production showcased Adams' innovation in lighting design. Lighting cues helped focus the audience's attention on specific scenes as they played, a strategy familiar to us today, but new in the early 20th century. A system of colored lights, visible only to the players, helped keep track of when to move and when to speak, since the scale of the stage made following cues difficult. With Adams on stage and on horseback, and carrying the play as its title character, 11 stage managers had to make sure the transitions from scene to scene unfolded seamlessly. That wasn't easy, given the more than 1,000 extras milling about, some on horses, some on foot, and in mock armor imported from Europe. Behind the scenes, 50 assistants managed mid-show costume changes for this army of performers, while 200 stagehands maneuvered massive pieces of scenery. Some 15,000 people attended the show, so many that the state militia and police did crowd control, and public transit authorities increased service to cope with the demand. Adams, already the most famous actress in the United States, now became the country's most ambitious and impressive theater impresario, outstripping her old boss Frohman. Czech nationalist and Beaux-Arts master Alphonse Mucha created this promotional poster for Maude Adams' adaptation of The Maid of Orleans, performed at Harvard University Stadium in June 1909. Following her triumph in Massachusetts, Frohman announced Adams would personally produce Shakespeare's As You Like It in 1910, on the order of her previous outdoor pageants, this time at the University of California, Berkeley. Several thousand people showed up to see Adams' latest outdoor spectacular as the sun set over California. Critics singled out the lighting in particular for special praise. Actors seemed to glow as they move. Scene transitions happen in pitch black. Critics were elated. What the audience saw, according to one review, was a consecutive series of graceful quattrocento pictures, glowing in color, wonderfully framed by the purple night, and moving upon a canvas, an exquisite illusion, a beautiful panorama. At the close of the last act, the audience sat in silence, stunned by the experience before bursting into wild applause and ovations. Adams' audiences were experiencing a revolution in lighting design underway since the early 19th century, helped along by Edison, Tesla, and accelerated by Adams and her team. Electricity was replacing older modes of illumination, such as kerosene lamps, natural gas jets, and limelight spots. In 1879, the Edison Corporation under Thomas Edison invented an electric lamp bright enough for theatrical use, and advertised this breakthrough at Munich's 1882 Electrical Exposition. Soon, theaters all over the world were switching to electric bulbs, yet the technology still had several disadvantages. The filaments were thin and sensitive and needed absolute stability, so moving a light to refocus its beam was out of the question. The lamps also ran very hot and generated a glare that could wash out scenery, costumes, makeup, and faces. Since the 1890s, Adams had been experimenting with new methods of lighting. She worked with technicians and engineers to do away with gas lighting altogether, perhaps the first such effort in the history of American theater. To mitigate glare, she used special fabrics for sets and costumes that eliminated shadows and diffused rather than reflected light. Her fabric knowledge was solid, as she also created the Peter Pan collar back in 1905. These breakthroughs became crucial to the success of Peter Pan, which called for actors to fly through the night with the help of cords and winches against a backdrop of stars, sails, and planets. By the 1910s, Adams had jettisoned footlights and border lights, the standard arrangement for electric bulbs, and instead suspended lamps from catwalks high above the stage itself to achieve tightly focused pools of illumination around the actors and scenery below. Her personal genius for acting and stagecraft were apparent by this point, but she did not work alone. Several people and forces combined to enable Adams to realize her visions. Her devotion to her stagehands was apparent, as she would frequently supplement their salaries from her own income. She also knew all the right people. Would you really want to mess with JM Barrie, baronet, personal friends with British prime ministers and the royal family? Adams also had the support of Charles Frohman, who controlled New York theaters and had no problem blackballing his critics, which you can see from my video on Frohman. We know Adams had at least 2 same-sex relationships, her supposed first only ending with her partner Lily Florence's early death in 1901. This loss, after a 2-year relationship, sent Adams into a temporary retirement, which entailed extended stays at a spa, sanatorium, and convent likely run by the Sisters of the Cenacle in Europe, out of the public eye. From 1905 and for almost the rest of her life, she lived with the second of her 2 life partners, Louise Boynton, who had her own career as an editor, author, and publisher, and they are buried together at Adams' former estate in New York and or at the Sisters of the Cenacle in the Catskills. I have read differing accounts as to where their graves are. There are photos of Boynton wearing a nun's wimple, and so I am not sure if Boynton was also a sister. She always said she would never get married, said Dale Spencer, the curator for the Lake Ronkonkoma Historical Society. The thing she was married to was her acting. Adams was partially able to be so innovative because she invested her money very wisely. She was able to buy a farm in Ronkonkoma named Sandy Garth from a fellow actor whom she first visited in 1894. She eventually purchased nearly 900 acres of local land, including what are now the Cenacle Sisters Retreat and the grounds of Sachem North High School. She also bought an apartment house in New York City and a summer home in the Catskills. The only thing that can save Tinkerbell is for you to believe in fairies. Do you believe in fairies? Was a line in Peter Pan delivered directly to the audience by an actress, Maude Adams, and later Gladys Cooper in drag, playing a character who lived in a dream world, according to his own juvenile sense of right and wrong, supported by a group of lost boys who were occasionally children, occasionally actors, and occasionally actresses in drag. As such, the line had multiple meanings, and we see that confusion and inversion celebrated or warned about today. In May 1905, Frohman was aboard the Lusitania with one of his male lovers after it had been torpedoed by a German U-boat. Adams was devastated by the news of his death, but managed to organize a memorial service for hundreds of mourners. She did not step into his shoes as theater impresario of New York. She came down with influenza in 1918 and further withdrew from the stage. Post-World War I, America was a very different place. In the next few years, Adams devoted her full attention to the problems of stage lighting. Around 1920, she realized her experience, expertise, and intuition might be useful to the film industry. She began work the following year with GE in upstate New York on a bigger, brighter, incandescent bulb for stage and screen. General Electric's director, Willis R. Whitney, recognized Adams' scientific aptitude immediately. "Where did she get it?" he asked. The answer should have been clear enough. Never having attended college or high school, she got it from years of innovation on stages across the United States, from Broadway to Berkeley. Adams and Boynton, by now longtime domestic partners, rented a house near GE's labs in Schenectady, where Adams charted the progress of a team of engineers, participated in brainstorming sessions and experiments, and offered insights on applications of the new technology. The idea was to use more stable tungsten filaments to allow for high wattage and easy maneuverability of the fixture. Several months into the project, Adams invited Whitney to witness the progress. What he saw, a prototype of the massive incandescent bulb, shocked and delighted him. Still, the invention wasn't quite operable, and another 2 years passed before Adams and the engineers had a working product that was ready for market. The last stage of development was where Adams' expertise became most valuable. She ensured that further adjustments to the bulb, especially with respect to maneuvering and focusing, would make it appealing to theater and movie producers. At the same time, she was experimenting with early color film technology. News of these latest forays attracted the interest of George Eastman, whose company led the industry in the manufacture of film for motion pictures. An agreement between Eastman, GE, and Adams came to nothing, however, as Adams preferred to return to the entertainment industries, where all her creative faculties might be employed, not just her expertise in lighting design. Eastman would play a big role in her legacy, however, as it contains her screen tests in the 1940s and 1930s. If you watch these screen tests online, you will notice Adams does the same scene differently each time. She draws you in with her facial expressions, movements, and voice projection. After the parting of ways in 1923, GE continued work on the bulb, patenting it in the early 1930s. By that time, the bulbs were already in use all over the country. GE credited Adams as the first inventor on 3 patents: U.S. patent number 1884957 for an illuminating device, the massive lamp itself, U.S. patent number 1963949 for a high-powered illuminating device, a cooling apparatus, and supporting frame for the lamp, and U.S. patent number 2006820 for another illuminating device, the system for supporting the filament, thereby allowing the lamp to be moved. Taken together, the patents presented a marketable lighting system that featured the world's largest incandescent bulb. Using 30,000 watts, it could do the work of 60,000 candles, giving directors and cinematographers a steady, reliable, adjustable beam for setting actors, actresses, and scenery in the very best light. Adams performed on stage a few more times in the 1930s before settling at Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri. The president of Stevens asked that Adams start a theater program there for the young women, and gave her full control over the curriculum. It must have been a familiar arrangement to Adams, the trusting patron, a supportive community, and total autonomy. Today, her portrait hangs on the back wall of the Stevens Playhouse. We have her there, explains retired theater professor Rob Doyen, so that when you're on stage, you know that Miss Adams is watching everything you do and supporting you. A side room nearby, the Maude Adams Gallery, contains the most prized artifacts of her career, including one giant light bulb intact with a filament as wide as your hand. Adams' home design in New York reflects her experience on the stage, with layered levels in the yard, named after the home in the play that helped make her famous. She named the home after the house in Barrie's The Minister's Wife, which was the first collaboration between the actress and playwright. And at $4.875 million in 2022, Chatham Hill costs a bit more than Faith, Trust, and Pixie Dust. The spacious 8,489 square foot house features 5 baths, 6 bedrooms, 8 fireplaces, a deck, and a spiral staircase leading to the primary bedroom. The stone and wood exterior, wooden floors, and beamed ceilings complement the 31-acre wooded property, which provides each room with a panoramic view of the Catskills. The quiet seclusion reflects the intensely private personal life Adams led. Entertainment spaces in the house include a billiard room. Barrie loved billiards, and I believe he may have stayed with Adams in New York, but could not find evidence of this in his letters. However, many of his letters were destroyed by one of his wards, Peter Llewellyn Davies, after his death. A gym and a home movie theater, although don't expect to screen any film starring Adams. While she had an illustrious stage career, she died in 1953, and her screen tests came to nothing. She was interested in producing films and had plans to produce and star in a film adaptation of Peter Pan, but she wanted it to be in color. When she failed to invent a way to film in color, she abandoned this, feeling black and white films looked cheap and lacked emotion, according to a letter she wrote to Barrie in 1920. This was a contrast to the prevailing thought at the time, including by D.W. Griffith and others, which was black and white film established that what was on screen wasn't real, it was just a movie. The demarcation between art and real life was very important to early filmmakers who did not want to stir obsession, but not so much Adams, who wanted to blend the worlds together. Adams outlived her partner Boynton by 2 years. Despite her generous provision for the Sisters of Cenacle and the Catskills, their order was given up to the Catholic Church to be a retiring home for priests in 2020.